Welcome to the Happy Mama Movement podcast. I'm Amy Taylor-Kabbaz, mama, journalist, coach, and founder of Mama Rising. This podcast is a space of community and collaboration. We gather stories of matrescence, motherhood, womanhood, and change told by our Mama Rising coaches and mothers around the globe, in the knowing that through our stories, we can begin to heal and change the way the world sees, values, and supports mothers everywhere. So, welcome to the Happy Mama Movement. And welcome to an episode of Take the Mic. Take the Mic is an initiative of Mama Rising to hand this platform and this microphone over to one of our amazing Mama Rising coaches and facilitators around the world to give her a chance to share her story of matrescence and motherhood, the stories of the mothers in her community, so we can all hear each other's stories, heal together, and change the way the whole world acknowledges matrescence and motherhood. So here is one of our coaches.
Hi, I'm Claire, and I'm speaking with you here on Boorloo, or Perth, which is under the custodianship of the Wadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I moved to this beautiful place 3 years ago with my now 3-year-old daughter and my 7-year-old son and my wonderful husband. I am an ex-engineer who decided to do something different postpartum, and now I work in the perinatal space, supporting people through pregnancy and postpartum, which is a big part of the matrescence journey and a very foundational part of it. Now, like many perinatal practitioners, I came to this work through my own matrescence journey. So, to share a little bit of that with you today, I feel that my matrescence journey started from conception. So when I was trying to conceive with my first child, I always expected that I would breeze through getting pregnant and having a baby because I'm the oldest of 6 children and I have 42 cousins. So there are a lot of children and babies that have come out of our family. The thing was, when I started trying, I realized that it was going to be a little bit more difficult for me. We had been trying for over a year and not really getting anywhere. And I guess across that journey, I had started to look into all the things, my diet, my lifestyle, etc. And as we continued down that path, it became more and more clear to me that part of the problem was that with my work as an engineer in the mining industry, I was constantly working in a very left brain field of work. So very logical, forward thinking, always on the go, doing, busy, and working primarily managing crews of 40 to 50-year-old males. I tended to really be in a more masculine mindset in order to kind of manage in that environment. And when I started to become more and more aware of this, I made a big decision. This was a real turning point for me. And that was that if I did want to have children, that I needed to take a step back. So I made a decision to step away from mining, away from engineering, to slow down, to get a little more into my right brain, a little bit more into the feminine part of me. And during this exploration, I started to become aware of the space I was occupying and the space I was living in. And it was through this awareness that I realized that although we were preparing to welcome a child into our lives, we actually created a space for them to be. Now, we had a room in mind where the baby would go, but it was currently being used as a study. So we decided to clear out the room and really shift the energy of that room in order to, signify that we were serious about this. 1 month after I did that, I conceived. And that really, for me, opened my eyes to how much more there is to this journey than just our physical bodies, or perhaps, as we focus a lot on during conception, our hormones. Now, I had a few more lessons to learn, obviously, probably still more to come. The next big lesson and experience came when I was 32 weeks pregnant. Unfortunately, I was doing some washing and I slipped in a puddle of water and did the splits. Now, anyone at 32 weeks pregnant probably doesn't want to be doing the splits, especially if you've never done them before. I ended up with a severe amount of groin pain and a nasty groin hernia to go with it, an inguinal hernia. And that's how I spent the rest of my pregnancy and most of the first year of my postpartum period in chronic pain. Now, during this time, I was living on a remote island called Groot Island in the Northern Territory, where there is limited medical support, and I didn't have any family support there. I had friends who had become like family, but most of them had their own children and their own isolated life to kind of manage. So it was a very isolating experience. And during this pregnancy and postpartum time, I lent upon two things. Firstly, my yoga practice, and secondly, journaling. And during my postpartum, I had decided to undertake yoga teacher training because I was so interested in the area, not with the intention of teaching, but just to dive deeper into it and as a way to kind of distract myself from the challenges I was facing. Now, as I undertook the training and on the side also doing my journaling, I started to notice emerging or some deep similarities. What I was writing and journaling about in my matrescence experience reflected very similarly to some of the fundamental concepts in the yoga tradition, which are the yama and niyama, or some guiding principles that support our external interactions with our environment and our internal interactions with ourselves. And as I began to realize more and more this correlation, I started to bring this yoga philosophy into my yoga practice and into my life. Now, fast forward a little while, we moved to Tasmania, and I actually decided I would start facilitating yoga classes. And as I journeyed into that work, I found myself drawing more on these experiences that I'd journaled about and these concepts of the yama and niyama, which unfortunately are less talked about in yoga spaces in the West than they should be, because of the heavy focus on asana or movement and posture that is occurring in yoga spaces in the West, which is really actually only a small part of what yoga really is all about. So while I was working on all this and bringing it all together for myself, I came across the word matrescence. And that was a huge moment for me. That was the moment when these concepts that I had been talking about in a bit of a mouthful, talking about that I wanted to support people through conception, pregnancy, postpartum, and parenting, actually had a word. And that word was matrescence, that entire journey. The other thing I felt like I had been continuing to journal and experience about was how postpartum wasn't just finished at 6 weeks after you've had the baby, when you go and get your check at the doctor or the physio and they tick that box and they say you're all good, see you later. And it was something that I was becoming more and more passionate, having seen how little support there is after that period is over. And I think the word matrescence really solidified for me, yes, this is really something more people need support in this. More people need to know about this. This needs more acknowledgement. And that really has been uh, uh, changed in the trajectory of where I've headed with my work and even balancing that with my family life since that time. And if I looked back at that point, and I started to realize what had been the biggest learnings from my first foray into matrescence. Biggest thing I took away that I wished I had known was that it takes a whole team. And I really learnt this the hard way in a very isolated part of Australia. But it really does take a team of support to have a matrescence experience where you can feel fulfilled, where you can feel healthy, where you can feel seen and heard. And I really took that with me as I stepped into my second pregnancy. This pregnancy conceived the month that we started trying. And everything about my journey this time was polar opposite. I was ready with the knowledge that I really needed a team around me, knowing that I now had this tendency towards chronic pain and still some residual of that. I had physios supporting me. I had a beautiful exercise physiologist. I had hired a private midwife because I knew that having a vaginal birth after a cesarean, which I had ended up having with my son, which is a whole nother story, um, would not be something that I could do alone walking straight into the hospital system. I also had an amazing hypnotherapist helping me with my mindset. Of course, I had my yoga knowledge and tools as a pre and postpartum yoga teacher. And I even did hypnobirthing with my amazing husband. I had an amazing acupuncturist on board and a chiropractor. Now, I really want to acknowledge here that coming from a very privileged place to be able to afford the support that I needed, and that I had quite a complex case with my chronic pain and uh, trying for a VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after cesarean. However, there are many ways that we can create a team around us, and there's so much free information available these days that we can lean on, people we can learn from who are generous with their accessible offerings, where we can find some of this support. So with all this support on board, I had a beautiful birthing experience with my daughter. We had a home birth VBAC, and my postpartum experience was also vastly different as I hired a postpartum doula to support us during that time. So I definitely feel that I learned from what I didn't know the first time. That doesn't mean that there weren't plenty of other challenges, both physical, emotional, and cultural, social, but it is all part of the ride. Mhm. So where has this led me to now? So with this realization and this sharing of the yama and niyama, or these yoga philosophy principles, I have gone on to develop an online program called Practical Yoga Philosophy for Parenthood. This program covers uh, relevant areas for conception, pregnancy, postpartum, and parenting. So the whole suite of matrescence. And I was had a very pinch yourself or starstruck moment when I was asked to collaborate with my mentor, Anna Davis from Bliss Baby Yoga, to create this online program, which is now available through their platform. And having enjoyed so much creating this online program, I have since been inspired to create a new online program, which is in the works at the moment, coming out in February 2024, and that is Yoga for Home Birth. I learned so much on my own home birthing journey, and really started to realize that choosing to birth outside the mainstream hospital system is really a step towards autonomy and taking radical and deep responsibility. And so this program is really to support people in those steps through these deeper concepts of yoga, not just the movement. Of course, there's plenty of movement and breathing exercises in there, but it's really only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to yoga. The other work that I do is I am in the coaching space now as well. I've noticed so much similarity between yoga facilitation and coaching, with the real core of this work being holding space for people. And so there's been a beautiful overlap between those two modalities for me. And at the same time, I'm also on the way through studying to be a Bowen therapist. Now, having these three different kind of modalities, both through physical support, mental and emotional support, and spiritual support, is part of my bigger vision for the Centre of Bright Beginnings, which is my business. And that bigger vision is to have a collaborative perinatal care centre where people are cared for through their conception and pregnancy journey, not only until 6 weeks postpartum, right until at least that 1 year postpartum and beyond if needed. So think perinatal counsellors and psychologists, um, Pilates and yoga classes, nutritionists or naturopaths, body workers such as acupuncturists and bone therapists, all those kind of people all in the one spot with the creche. So I'm so excited about working towards that journey. Of course, being still where I am on my matrescence journey with the 3-year-old, I'm just taking it step by step at the moment. But at the moment, we do have some beautiful modalities on offer. In the online space, very excited to continue growing the online offerings there. Having lived remotely myself for 4.5 years on Group Island, and then people consider remotely on the outskirts of Launceston in Tasmania. I know what it's like to have less access to classes and education, and how important the online space is in supporting people through matrescence, and really starting to work towards limiting the isolation of this period of time. So if you resonated with my story, if you're interested to ask any questions, obviously I could talk about this all day, and I love talking about matrescence, and I also really love connecting with other people who do. So you can connect with me through the details that will be in the show notes for this episode. And you can also then jump onto my website if you are considering conception or pregnancy or early in those phases, or if you are coming into postpartum and parenting. All my offerings are there, and of course I would love to work with you through that as well. But I also pretty generous with my time and information, so if you've got any brief questions you want to ask, then feel free to jump in and ask them with me. Thanks so much for spending the time listening to this episode, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.
Thanks, as always, for being a part of our global matrescence community. Please take a moment and make sure you're subscribed to this podcast in your podcast player so you can always be notified of our next episode. And if you would like to work with a coach on your own experience of matrescence, please go to mamarising.net and explore our directory of phenomenal coaches, workshop leaders, space holders and facilitators around the globe. You can also explore our Global Matrescence Foundation and consider donating so a mama in need can access the support of one of our coaches and still ensure that our coaches receive the income and support they need so they can continue to work in this way. And finally, if you would like to be a coach, a facilitator and a matrescence activist in your own community, jump on our waitlist for our next intake of the Mama Rising Facilitator training at mamarising.net. Thank you for being here and being part of this movement. Until next week, bye.